Hi guys, welcome back to a new video, and today we're in a different spot. I know I'm on vacation right now, but I had to film a video here because it's the new Kotze album came out today, called In Times New Roman, and I listened to it on the way to this vacation house, and it was, I gotta say, this album was pretty good. Now, Queens of the Stone Age, of course, I don't need to introduce them. They were probably my favorite band in my childhood. It's like one of the only bands I listened to a lot in my childhood. And sorry if you hear noise out there. It's just glad you're gonna have to deal with. This is the best spot to film in this whole house. But anyway, so In Times New Roman, the new, possibly last album by Kotze, because let's be honest, Josh has cancer. He's having trouble with his kids, and it might not go much longer. But I'm glad that they at least came back for one more album, because I kind of thought that they wouldn't do another album after Villains, and I didn't love Villains. I still liked it. There's still some really good songs on there, but not amazing. But I will say that this one is definitely a step up from Villains. Maybe the worst one besides that, although I think it might be better than the first album. I don't know. I have to give this more listens to really think of a opinion on it. But we're gonna go through each of the songs and how I felt about them. So the first song is Obscenery, which this album is full of title puns. You're just gonna have to get used to it. His title puns is on another level. He comes up with so many weird and funny lines that of mixing words and clever wordplay. I think that's where Josh has really decided to show in this album, is his excellent comedic wordplay, like Obscenery, and there's some others on this album that we'll get to in a second that also had that. Obscenery was quite good. It is a very noisy first song, but that's fine. I don't mind that. The next song is Paper Machete. Of course, more like Paper Mache. This song was also pretty good. Paper Machete is a pretty noisy song, but that's not a bad thing at all. It's just it's an interesting especially coming from after Villains, which was a lot more toned down, a lot more keyboard driven. I was hoping that they wouldn't keep going with the keyboards, but I kind of doubted that they would not do keyboards. But this album doesn't have much keyboards on it, or at least they're not the main instrument this time. So I think that's good for them, because I think that's kind of where they went wrong for Villains, is trying to make an album more keyboardy. This album also sounds like it's like a mixture between some of the songs sound like they're a mixture between Like Clockwork and Lullabies to Paralyze, which is good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with mixing those two together. It's just an interesting idea, especially because they come, In Times New Roman is 18 years after Lullabies to Paralyze. It sounds like it almost sounds like the in-between album for Villains, and in between, before Villains but after Like Clockwork, which is weird because it came after both of them. But yeah, so Negative Space it honestly sounds a bit like Dance a Little Liar by Arctic Monkeys, which makes sense because Josh produced that song, and I think he sang a bit on it. But again, I like Negative Space, and again, his wordplay shines on this album. Time and Place, which is the next song, is also good, and I like the atmosphere it brings, and the guitar solo at the end was really cool. I like that a lot. Now, Made to Parade, the fifth song in the album, is again, I really like the groove on that song. It's a nice groove, and it's one of my more favorite songs on this album, at least for the first impression. It was one of the better songs on this album. Honestly, this whole album kind of has a weird vibe to it. I don't really know how to describe it. It's not creepy, but it's kind of unsettling. I mean, that's good. It's not a bad thing. It's just an interesting vibe that most of the songs share. It's kind of like an unsettling, uneasy feeling, which is fine, but I don't know. Now, Carnivore, which is another clever wordplay, is the next song. This is one of the singles that I heard before the album came out. It's still pretty good. It has a very sad atmosphere, and it pulls that off damn well. The atmosphere, and it's just kind of sad, which is, you know, it's nice to have in a more noisy and more unsettling album, just a nice calmer song. It's not like calm, but it's calmer than a lot of the other songs on this album. Also, another thing I've noticed is that for these songs, a lot of them is kind of hard to find what the chorus is. They all have very interesting structures, not normal verse chorus structure, which is good, but it makes these songs just feel just a tiny bit like structureless and kind of like doesn't really know where it's going, but it's still not bad. I still like it. It's just makes it feel tiny bit directionless. What the Peephole Say, another clever wordplay pun. This album is basically almost every song in the album is like that. Anyway, What the Peephole Say is one of my favorites on the album. Is that it's faster and it's cooler and has a nice cool vibe to it, and I just like it. It's faster and it's just more upbeat. It's not upbeat in like it's a happy song, but it's faster. Sicily, which is the 8th song in the album, is a lot more. It has a very haunting vibe. As I've said before, these songs all have mostly them, they all sort of have an uneasy feel to them, which again is fine. Sicily is where it gets pulled off the most, where the haunting vibe works. It's very weird, and I don't know, it's just very. Sicily is probably one of the weirder songs on the album, but I still like it. Then we get to Emotion Sickness, which is my favorite. It's the first thing, and I know it's the first single, but I've heard it many times since then. But I really like this song. It's such an earworm. I've had it in my head the whole day. If I hear it once, I'll have it in my head for the rest of the day. It's one of those songs, and yeah, it's just such a good song. It's just pure good Katsuo, which is kind of what we missed on Villains. Even the good songs on Villains kind of were, they didn't sound a lot like Katsuo. I mean, sure, you could tell that this is probably Katsuo, but it was more like, this is like Katsuo, but not, like, watered down a bit. And again, I still like Villains. There's some great songs on Villains, but this feels like it's harkening back to the true Katsuo that was kind of happening on Like Clockwork. This seems like the correct follow-up to Like Clockwork instead of Villains, and it's just interesting, and Emotion Sickness pulls it off the best. Of course, the title referencing motion sickness, but then emotion. It's a very good song, and it's a nice message, but it's also fast, kind of. It's not as fast as What the Peephole Say, but it's still a nice song, and I don't know, I just really like it, and that's my favorite on the album. Straight Jacket Fitting, the last song in the album, and it's also the longest song in Katsu's whole discography, excluding live songs, but it is their longest song, and you would think that, if it's the longest song, then I must like it, because I love long songs. Well, I don't know, it's definitely not my favorite, probably not even my second favorite, but I still like it. It has kind of a like Villains of Circumstance kind of vibe, which is the last song on Villains, which isn't bad. It's just, interesting. And it also kind of sounds like Warsaw from Them Crooked Vultures. I don't know if you've heard them, but it was Dave Grohl, Josh, and John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin. And it's a really good album, but this song kind of feels like Warsaw. It's the same kind of tempo, and Warsaw is really long, and this song is really long. It feels like sometimes it's just kind of trundling along, just like ga-dung, 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 and it just goes on for. I feel like they shouldn't have been their longest song, because it doesn't feel like their longest song, because it's all kind of the same, and that's not bad. It's just an interesting technique. And also the last 2 minutes of the song kind of feels like tacked on a bit. It feels a bit tacked on, and it kind of feels like just a way to get this song to be their longest song ever. which, I mean, fair enough, but, like, the last 2 minutes is not really that eventful. It's just kind of, like, I honestly don't even really remember it, but it's just kind of weird, and it's a weird way to end the album, and a kind of a anticlimactic ending for the album, especially because of how hype everything is, and now we're just left with this weird slow ending section. Also, something I haven't mentioned yet is there's a lot of orchestral arrangements on this album. Like there's quite a bit of there's quite a lot of orchestra on this album, which is fine, but I didn't expect it. I really did not expect Katsa to have like a bunch of orchestral, and it's not like it's part of the full album, like it's one of the main focuses of it, but it's definitely there, and it's definitely noticeable on a lot of songs, and that, again, is fine. It's just an interesting idea, and it makes sense because they basically never put on orchestra on any of their songs, so I'm glad that they finally were like, you know what, we need to put some more an orchestra on some of these songs, which I think was the right call. And that's the album. Overall, I quite liked it. They weren't all great. I still liked all the songs to a degree, but some of them were not amazing. But again, this album is just one I'll have to listen to many times in order to get a feel for how I really feel about this album. But this series is about first impressions, so that was my first impression on the new Katsa album. What do you guys think? Leave in the comments down below what you think of this album, or what's your favorite song, if you hate it, you love it. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video, where this won't be the background this time. This is the last time you'll ever see this background.